important stuff when we're thinking of motivation and understanding how it is that we go about doing our work and what compels us to do the work that we do or the things that we do. Now, motivation, there's usually two types of it, or we categorize it into two categories, or it stems from two different places, right? We have two types. We have intrinsic motivation, and we have extrinsic motivation. Any thoughts on what intrinsic motivation could be, or what constitutes intrinsic motivation, or what could be considered an intrinsic motivator? Thoughts?
More
personal, okay. Other keywords?
Within a person.
Within the person, okay. Other stuff, intrinsic motivation. Any potential intrinsic motivators? So something.
Value.
Sorry?
Different value, your value.
Your values could, okay, values could potentially be kind of motivating in some way. Diego? Food? Okay. Not quite. Intrinsic motivation, other thoughts on it, characteristics of it? Okay, so some key things that we've already coined is there's kind of that personal attachment. It's something that's very kind of within the person, right? It's something that stems from you. You exert it upon yourself, okay? So intrinsic motivation, you get it from the type of work that you do, from the activities that you engage in. Okay? It's something very personal. It's not very materialistic. It's not very tangible. Okay? So feelings of achievement, okay? Feelings of pride that I helped my coworker today, right? Those are things that are kind of abstract. They're meta. They're at that higher level. You can't necessarily kind of put a price on them, let's say, right? They're good feelings. They're things that stem from within me, right? I engage in something. I get a good feeling from it. I feel a sense of achievement. I feel a sense of pride. That's great. That's stemming from within me, and that's compelling me to even do more of that, right? So I helped a coworker. I felt good about myself, right? I did some organizational citizenship behaviors today by helping my coworker. I felt good about myself. That is an intrinsic motivator, right? That act of helping, okay, transferring knowledge to someone else, right? Helping them in their job, okay? That's something that is compelling me to do more of that, okay? Some key sources of intrinsic motivation or some intrinsic motivators, right? When you're doing work that is truly challenging and is really helping you kind of achieve things at a higher level, right? You're very engaged in the work that you're doing, right? That all kind of generates some good feelings about yourself and help you truly kind of check off a lot of boxes for yourself, right? So those are some key things that we think about when we talk about intrinsic motivation. Okay? So it's usually something that can't be given to you from someone else. It's something that stems from within. I would say that's a critical characteristic, or that's a key component to it. Now, extrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivators, thoughts on those? It's quite the opposite, obviously. So go along with me. Extrinsic motivation. What are some potential types of extrinsic motivators in the workplace? Yes?
I guess like getting a bonus.
Absolutely, right? So we could think of it as it's something that's tangible, it's something materialistic, right? It's something that's being given to me from an external source. That's my boss or my organization, right? It is tied perhaps to achievement, which kind of could be something intrinsic, right? But in essence, it's something materialistic. Any other thoughts on types of extrinsic motivators or extrinsic
Role models.
Role models? So what do you mean? Tell me a bit more about role models. So seeing somebody that could kind of like push you. Okay.
To be like someone else.
Okay. I'd say it's probably a bit leaning more so on the intrinsic side. It's more related to achievement, seeing something that you would like to emulate. Okay. Diego? Rewards like?
Awards.
Oh, awards. Okay. So employee of the month, getting a title, for example, or getting like a gift card because you did well this month. Absolutely, right? So it could be kind of like deemed under benefits or rewards. Okay. Other stuff in extrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivators? Any other thoughts on it?
Improvement?
Like
they give you a higher position.
when you achieve something, they encourage you by
Yeah,
improving.
and that's one that I find usually, like in all classes that I've taught, like all the students that I've talked to about this, usually the one when it comes to like, getting that one up or moving up the scale or the corporate ladder, that's one that tends to be kind of a bit subjective. Some people find it to be, it's like extrinsic because there's like a title and there's like a superficial element to it, and then other people say, actually it's something that's more internal, it's something that, you're getting a sense of achievement from. So it tends to be a bit of a subjective one. I would say if we want to look at it kind of at the surface and that I'm just moving up one title, right? I went from accountant to senior accountant. We could say that kind of that title change is more of the extrinsic side of it. But you could also kind of make the argument that there are some intrinsic elements there that could be motivating. Okay? Now in our discussion so far, actually right now, we started kind of talking about kind of the existence of those two, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, or intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, right? And one area of interest is the dynamic between them, right? How do intrinsic and extrinsic motivators work together? Can they work together, or do they cancel each other out, right? So we have this kind of perspective, or this school of thought, at one point we had it, I would say, in that when there's an extrinsic motivator present, or when we tie an extrinsic motivator into something, right? There was kind of a risk, or there was some trepidation surrounding whether that could ruin or that could trump your intrinsic motivation. Okay? So, kind of use some layman's terms here. Let's say you love painting, or you love music, you love playing instruments, right? Let's say you do it as a hobby, but all of a sudden you're starting to get paid to do it, right? You're performing at shows and you're getting some sort of pay for it, right? Essentially, that school of thought or that perspective, what it feared at the time was that kind of, I took you from doing painting as a hobby and all of a sudden I tied some element of pay or compensation to it. There was some fear that tangible or that materialistic element could potentially trump the intrinsic motivation there. Could it trump the intrinsic motivator here in that whole interaction or in that whole act? Okay? So we had some concerns surrounding that. I would say that could be the case at times, but we found with more research, the more research that we've done, that it seldom happens. Okay? In fact, extrinsic motivators are good. We should not discount them. Just because they tend to be kind of more materialistic or superficial, we cannot discount the value that extrinsic motivators add. Okay? People need money to survive. If you cannot survive and meet your basic needs and necessities in life, can you go to work and perform at your full capacity, right? You're going to be distraught. You're going to be distracted the whole day because you cannot make ends meet at home. So that's one thing we want to keep in mind. Extrinsic motivators are not bad. Just because they tend to be kind of tangible and we give them that superficial or materialistic connotation, okay, it doesn't mean that they're completely going to defeat the intrinsic elements, okay? We need them. We need some element of extrinsic motivation as human beings to survive. Okay? It's more so the configuration, probably, I would say, okay, or how we administer them. That's something that we want to keep in mind. Okay? So the two could actually be quite complementary. They could help each other out. Okay? It doesn't have to be a mutually exclusive relationship between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Okay? You could still enjoy painting and make some money off of it. It doesn't have to fully deplete the intrinsic motivation that you get from it. Okay? Questions about that relationship between the two, between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, or intrinsic and extrinsic motivators? Good? Awesome. Now, in understanding the process or the mechanism of motivation, understanding kind of like how it is that it stems, how it is that we are compelled to put in this effort, right? There was this effort component that we talked about. What is it that gets me to put that effort or convinces me to put in that effort, right, to start with, to generate more outcomes or more behaviors? That's where we turn our attention to needs, okay? And needs essentially are those things. They could be psychological or physiological in nature. They could be kind of motives, desires, right? And those are the things that compel us to put in some effort. Okay? So those are the things that are usually either lacking from our life or we have them in our life. If they are lacking, then we are convinced that we need to do something to get them, to check them off of our list. Okay? And if we have them, then that's great. We kind of take them for granted after a while, right? But essentially, needs are those things that get us convinced or compel us to start putting in some effort. Okay? So that's why we allocate some attention to them, and we allocate a lot of theory to understanding how those needs actually mobilize us. And moving forward in our lecture today, what we're focusing on is, on one hand, we're going to start by talking about what those needs are. So understanding the theory that helped us uncover those needs. Okay? So we're going to start by saying, okay, for me to be motivated, what is it that gets me motivated? Okay, so what is that condition? What is that preceding thing that will get me motivated? And then in the latter part of the lecture, we're going to be focusing on process theories of motivation, and that's where we start talking about, okay, now that I uncovered what it is that motivates me, now I'm going to be talking or turning my attention to how it is that happens. So how do we mobilize that motivation? How does it actually come to be? Okay, so that's what we're going to be focusing our attention on in today's lecture, moving forward. Okay, we're going to start with need theories of motivation. Okay, and those theories of motivation help us understand the what. Okay, what is it that motivates me to work, to put in effort, to put in persistent effort? Okay, and then we're going to be moving towards understanding how it is that I get motivated. Okay, now when we're thinking about need theories of motivation, and specifically when we're trying to understand what it is that motivates me as a person or as an employee, we have two key theories that we're going to be focusing on. Okay? And I would say start taking notes, like really good notes, because we really need to understand the premise within which or through which those theories are motivational, or how those needs are actually motivational. Okay? That's, I would say, is the key learning outcome here, is how are those needs that I've uncovered, how are they motivational? Okay? So we have two theories. One of them you may have already seen from even high school, okay, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes, yes, nods, yes, Maslow's up, no. Okay, that's fine. And the other one is McConnell's theory of needs. Now, Maslow's theory of needs, or hierarchy of needs, I should say, and we should emphasize the word hierarchy in this one. What Maslow did is Maslow said, or what his perspective, rather, really was, that we have a lot of needs as human beings, but what he did is he categorized them in 5 categories. And he said that those needs, or those categories, go from more materialistic at the bottom to less materialistic at the top. Okay? So they go from tangible to intangible. Okay? So at the bottom in his hierarchy, we have physiological needs. So Diego, food, when you mentioned food, that is tangible. Right? That is something that is materialistic. Okay? It is easier to achieve. It is easier to fulfill over time. So we also think of it as something that is easier to take for granted. Right? You wake up every day and you know for sure that you're going to be able to find some sort of food in your fridge or be able to access it somewhere. Right? It's very materialistic. It's much more prevalent. Whereas when we move up the hierarchy, like especially when you think of kind of those two top levels, esteem and self-actualization, those are very intangible things. Those are not materialistic. Okay? When I feel that I've self-actualized, that's when I've become my own, where I've reached that self-fulfillment, where I've reached that level of high achievement, right? It's very abstract, it's very meta, right? It's the epitome of intrinsic, it's the epitome of everything meta. Okay? Whereas at the very bottom, we have things like food, water, shelter, right? Those are all more materialistic things. It's not to say that they're not hard to get, but once you get them, they lose their appeal. Okay? And in the middle, we find things like belongingness and love, so, forging good relationships, that social aspect, we see that a bit in the middle. Okay? So some key things to recap. At the bottom of the hierarchy, so Maslow, what he did was said, we have a lot of needs, and they fall in 5 categories. The categories go from more materialistic at the bottom, more tangible, to less materialistic, less tangible at the very top. Okay? And the premise of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay, and by the way, it's called hierarchy, just in case you didn't get it. The reason why it's called hierarchy is because we go from most tangible to least tangible. Okay? So we're ranking kind of those needs, essentially. And what Maslow went on to say is that as human beings, okay, we need to fulfill the lowest level of needs, okay, in order to be able to move up this hierarchy. Okay? So I need to be able to secure myself food, water, warmth, and rest for me to be able to turn my attention to security and safety. Okay? Once I check this off, I am then able to jump up to that next level. And it continues to go like this. Once I check security and safety off my list, then I am able to seek intimate relationships. Once that is checked off, then I turn my attention to kind of my self-esteem and the prestige that I get from what I'm doing. Once I check that off, then I'm able to self-actualize and focus on my growth. Okay? And Maslow believed that it goes in this direction. Okay? So if I do not fulfill my physiological needs, I can't move up the hierarchy. I'm stuck. Okay? So if we want to kind of digest this more and think of it more in layman's terms, you wake up every day. Okay? You need some sort of energy to be able to get on with your day. So the first thing that we do is we have breakfast. Okay? What Maslow is saying is, if you don't have food, if you don't have breakfast, you're not going to get energy today. So you cannot even leave your house to go work and self-actualize and socialize with others. Okay? Whereas let's say, okay, I woke up, I was able to have breakfast, I have some energy in me right now, right? I'm ready to get on with my day. I'm ready to leave the house and go to work. Let's say we live in a very corrupt country where, your safety is not guaranteed on the street, right? You may leave the house and get shot today. So you could argue that that is not meant. If I cannot guarantee for myself that I'm going to open the door and be able to get to work safely, right? You may not be moving up that hierarchy even, because you didn't even get to work, right? Let's say I did get to work, so safety needs are met. Now I start focusing on socialization, right? I go into work, I work with others, it's all great, right? I feel a sense of belonging, I meet friends, right? So that's how we move up this hierarchy. Okay? Another thing that Maslow said about this hierarchy, or how we go about fulfilling our needs. Once something is checked off your list, so for example, I fulfilled my physiological needs, it loses its appeal over time. Because you take it for granted. You know that you're going to wake up today and open your fridge and find food. Okay? You know with certainty that you know how to afford food, in a sense. Okay? So once you achieve a certain level, it loses its attractiveness. It loses its appeal. Okay? So it's no longer motivational. Okay? And usually that is very true of the lower levels. The lower levels truly lose their motivating capacity after time. Okay? They no longer get us going. They no longer compel us to put in effort because you take them for granted. The only exception to the rule, the one exception to the rule, is this highest level, which is self-actualization. Okay? That is the one that keeps you craving more. That is the one where you've achieved at a high level. You are focused on your growth, right? So you're doing great things in your job. You're receiving praise from your employer. You're feeling a sense of personal fulfillment and all of that. That is the thing that keeps us coming back for more. So that is the level where you want to kind of always keep coming back to. You're always wanting to kind of work more at that high level. Self-actualization keeps you craving more. It never loses its motivational capacity, or it never loses its motivating capacity. Okay? Whereas the rest, anything below self-actualization, over time you start taking it for granted. It loses its appeal once you've fulfilled it, right? You know that you could do it. You know that you could achieve it. You already have it. It's done. Self-actualization is the one that keeps us going. That's why you're always seeking promotions. That's why you're always seeking new jobs. That's why you're always traveling to become a worldly person, right? That's what we see going on in self-actualization. Okay? Questions about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Critiques of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, even. Danielle?
This isn't so much maybe related to our class, but basically this hierarchy of needs is saying that, like, homeless people could never self-actualize or reach their full potential or feel accomplished because they don't have...
If they're stuck there.
Yeah, they don't even have
right.
the guarantee of that.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think the model is flawed because of that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And that's fair. That's a very fair observation. Is that this is not a model that could, and we're going to see that in the next few slides, but we can talk about it right now. It's not a model that has been empirically proven to be universal, or what we're saying essentially is it doesn't apply to everyone, or it doesn't apply to everyone in the same way, because different people are motivated by different things, right? So for example, like I remember one student said this a few years ago in class, was like, okay, so for example, it was when things were really starting off in Syria, like things were really getting bad in Syria, and she was like, kind of like, you know, people there are educated as well, like they're very comparable to people in Canada, but you can't argue that physiological needs are not very kind of needed for them right now, like they're not taking them for granted right now. And that is true, right? At different points in time, at different points in life, your needs hierarchy is probably very different. What you need right now or what you take for granted right now is going to be very different from what you're going to be taking for granted later on, right? So that's why when I said it's unidirectional, Maslow's hierarchy is quite rigid, right? Like he made some very rigid assumptions in that, like, oh, if you don't fulfill this, you're stuck and you can't go further. It's not the case. Some days I may not need breakfast to go into work, right? Like if you want to dumb it down a bit, some days I may not need breakfast. So some days you could argue I could still go to work and feel a sense of belongingness without even fulfilling my physiological needs. So that's already, we're pinpointing some flaws in kind of this rigidity or in this unidirectional approach to his. Okay? And that's very fair to say. It's not universal. Different people perceive their needs or figure out their needs and go about accommodating them very differently. And for him to kind of be assuming this rigidity, not really the best kind of approach to it. He has some, like I would say there's a lot of credibility to it, and like as a framework, it's helped me a lot understand some things that I've been kind of assessing in my mind. But yeah, you have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, right? Like some people might even argue Wi-Fi is probably more of a necessary need before you could even start focusing on physiological needs. If I were to kind of make you guys redraw Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I would say Wi-Fi is going to be like right at the bottom, right, to get you going. So it's different, and with times, like it really changes. Okay.
Rest. Nobody's rested these days. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean we're not feeling accomplished with everything that we're doing.
I know. We're maniacs in a sense, right? Like when you put it that way, it's like we're completely like there's lack of rest, but we're like still going at it. Yeah, we're maniacs. That's why we're burnt out in a sense. Other thoughts on those? Yeah.
So we can say that you can reach the top, but still you miss some of that, which is in the middle.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, because like let's say in the situation of the war in Syria, there were some people with self-actualization, but they don't have the safety needs.
Sure. Yeah.
Because the government cannot do the safety job over there.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's where there are flaws to it, right? Now, some good things about it, some good things about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that it's kind of like, it considered a wide variety of needs, I would say. So it's kind of a bit holistic in that, you know, it didn't just focus on materialistic things, but it also focused on a wide range of things, okay? It talked about kind of the social aspects, right? It didn't just completely dismiss that, right? It acknowledges that human beings love to socialize, human beings derive some level of energy and kind of things that keep them going from engaging with others. And it really focused our attention on this self-actualization. So that new approach to focusing on positive psychology and what it is that keeps us going, right? Gave attention to that. So those are some good things about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, while keeping in mind the negative things about it, or the potential shortcomings or flaws in it. Okay? And that's what's kind of recapped here in this slide. We've already kind of discussed all of it, but it's also listed for you in that last slide on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Any other thoughts on Maslow's hierarchy of needs before we move forward to the second? Okay. Now, the second theory of needs that we're interested in covering is McClelland's theory of needs. Okay? And one key difference between Maslow and McClelland is that McClelland's theory of needs is not hierarchical. So McClelland did not believe that, you know, some needs are materialistic and they get taken for granted, and other needs are less materialistic and they're more important. McClelland was not concerned with that. In fact, his approach was completely different. Okay? Maslow was very much so concerned with saying, you know, these are materialistic needs, these are less materialistic needs, and we put them in a hierarchy. McClelland was more focused on conditions, and he believed that our needs reflect our personality. And he specifically focused on three types of needs. Okay? And he said our personalities inform whether we have those needs or not. And those needs are the needs for achievement, needs for affiliation, and needs for power. Okay? And he said that essentially our personality will inform whether we have those three needs or what combination of those three needs we have. And then as human beings, we seek out conditions or environments that help us fulfill those needs, or this combination of needs, of the three needs. Okay? So, needs for achievement. Those are focused on things like you could say that you derive those as a conscientious person, right? Somebody who's high on conscientiousness might also show high need for achievement, right? You want to accomplish a lot. You want to be kind of closing off so many sales on your job, right? You're really a goal setter. You like clear feedback that helps you improve all the time. You could be quite competitive, right? Those are some things we see when you have a high need for achievement. Okay? When you have a high need for affiliation, as the name suggests, you love being social. You love affiliating with others. At times you may even be too agreeable, right? You don't want to kind of piss off others, right? So you might conform. Okay? If you have a very high need for affiliation, it could be negative in that you might seek approval or seek conformity. Okay? And lastly, we have that need for power. You love to take control. You love to be the one who's at the helm. You want to be controlling the decision making. Okay? You love those positions of power. Okay? And that's what McClellan was concerned with. He said we have three needs, okay? And they exist in different combinations within every human being. So some human beings could have a zero need for affiliation, right? But they could be very high on the other two. And he said that human beings seek out environments and conditions that help you fulfill those needs, right? Now, the way it relates to us specifically in organizational behavior and in the employment context, okay, McClellan is basically saying, as human beings, we seek jobs that help us get those needs achieved, or our combination of needs achieved, okay? So if I am someone who has a high need for affiliation, but a low need for power and a low need for achievement, right? I might say I want to work in customer service because that is the one type of job that is really going to help me focus on that high need for affiliation. It's really going to fulfill that need for affiliation in me. Okay? Let's say I want to work, I have a very high need for achievement. Okay? You might seek a job in sales, right? Let's say I have a high need for power. You might seek a job in management, a managerial position. You might seek a job as a journalist, right? You control the story, right? You make decisions as to what you want to report on, okay? So that's how this works. We seek conditions. McClellan was very concerned with the conditions that help us fulfill our needs, okay? What type of environment will be conducive to me feeling fulfilled and motivated, essentially, okay? Oftentimes, or what we think is the best prototype of the most effective manager. So the most effective leaders or managers are usually people who have a very low need for affiliation, right? Because you don't want them always conforming or seeking approval, right? You cannot always seek approval from your subordinates, okay, as a manager. To be effective, you need to have some sort of distance. You need to have some sort of authority over them and some sort of power to say no to certain things, okay? And you usually have a very high need for power. So those are things that distinguish effective managers. Okay? They usually reflect a high need for power and a very low need for affiliation. Okay? Questions about McClellan's theory of needs?
So what kind of job would you say would be for that high achievement, high achievement? For example, like man would be a range of anything because you can basically feel achievement in the job, right?
I mean, sure, arguably yes, but we're thinking kind of someone who's like always meeting quotas, right? So like sales, think of investment bankers who are super competitive. So like we're kind of considering the extreme case. So we're thinking very competitive environments. We're thinking environments where there's commission, let's say, right? It's those metrics, it's those things that drive them, right? So fulfilling quotas, meeting sales targets and all that, that's what we envision there for someone who has a high need for achievement.
Could it also be like working for a company with lots of room for growth?
Yeah, potentially, right? Yeah. There's like a corporate ladder and you're really motivated to kind of be jumping up that corporate ladder as fast as possible. Yeah, I'd say so. Okay. Moving forward, do you want to take a break? Is this like too heavy of a theory for you? Or good? So, again, we focus on the what component. We focus on what it is that motivates me, right? We kind of delineated those needs that motivate us. But now we're going to try to understand the process or the mechanisms that get this motivation going. What is it that kind of like compels that motivation to come out as an effort or as a process, right? What is it that gets that effort out of you? Okay? And we have 3 theories that inform that. Okay? 3 process theories that inform that. And those are expectancy theory, equity theory, and goal setting theory. Expectancy theory, the major focus in expectancy theory is on the outcomes. Okay? The reason why it's called expectancy is because it focuses on the outcomes that we expect to get as employees, right? Very simple, okay? So what do I expect to get? The outcomes, and that's why it's called expectancy theory. And what it's honing in on, or what it's emphasizing, essentially is that the outcomes that we expect to get and the outcomes that we think we could get, we are able to get, okay? Those are the things that suck motivation out of us in a good way, not like, suck motivation out of meaning that I'm depleted. It's those things that compel more effort and more motivation out of me. Now, some key things that are important for this motivation to come out based on outcomes. The first thing, and we're going to start kind of from the back, from the right side, the outcomes have to be attractive. They have to be things that hold appeal to me. They have to be things that could satisfy me. Okay? And that's that concept of valence. Okay? Valence, when we talk about the valence of outcomes, when we say an outcome is valent or it has valence to me, right? Essentially, all I'm saying is that it's an attractive outcome, it brings me satisfaction. Okay? That's all I'm saying under valence. Okay? So as human beings, we start assessing, are those outcomes that are being offered to me or that are up for grabs on my job, are they of interest to me or are they not of interest to me? Are they potentially satisfying or are they potentially unsatisfying? Okay? That's what I'm concerned with here. And that's what's going to kind of start triggering more motivation and more effort from me. Now, outcomes that are up for grabs or rewards that are up for grabs are great, right? But there are some things that we need to be realistic about, okay? You're not going to be able to get those outcomes if you don't have the ability to get them, okay? So, let's say our organization says, if you achieve this level of sales, you get a $20,000 bonus. That's great. That has a lot of valence to me, right? But what if I'm a junior salesperson in the organization who's there on their 3rd month in the organization? It's not realistic to assume that you are able to get to that level and then get to that outcome, okay? So one thing that we assess as human beings when we're kind of assessing our outcomes and their valence to us is our ability to achieve that level of performance to get that outcome, okay? So I have to assess, is the probability of me achieving that performance level possible to start with, okay? Am I able to put in enough effort to get to that performance level, okay? So that's what I assess first, it's that expectancy. I'm saying, can I expect to be able to put in enough effort so that I could reach that performance level? That's what I assess first, okay? It's my E to P expectancy, okay? Effort to performance expectancy. Am I able to keep up? Am I able to put in enough effort to reach that high level of sales that's required? And then another thing that I assess is, okay, that high level of sales, is there a high likelihood that it's going to get me that promotion? Is there a high likelihood that it's going to get me the outcome that I seek, right? So you're not only assessing the ability, okay, that's within you, but you're also trying to kind of understand, is it going to make a difference or not, right? Like you have lots of people who might be kind of, especially younger people, like let's say in investment banking, they say, I'm going to go into this investment bank, full force ahead, I'm going to spend 15-hour days in this workplace. Okay, maybe it is within your effort, maybe your effort level could actually get you to put 15 hours a day, but you also have to think kind of, is my manager going to even acknowledge that I'm putting 15 hours a day? Or is my manager only assessing me on the 8 hours a day, right? So that's one thing you want to consider there, right? So you might be putting in all that effort, but let's say your manager doesn't care and all they want is outcomes, right? And a lot of people, they go into work and they think that it's all based on face time, right? They think that the more face time they show, the more kind of presence, right, they put out there, that's it. That's all their performance is going to rely on, or their assessment is going to rely on, right? When actually it might not be the case. So that's what we're assessing here is, now that I could potentially achieve this level of performance, is it likely to make a difference? Is it likely to generate positive outcomes for myself? Okay? So that's what we're concerned with there. So we're assessing those two things. We're assessing my likelihood to be able to meet that performance level, but then I'm assessing my likelihood, or the likelihood of that performance level generating something that's nice for me, something that has vagrants. Okay? So that's why essentially we say that people are motivated, or motivation stems out of people when they are working in things or working towards things that they know they are able to do, right? So they have the ability to do it, right? But also it is something that is attractive. It's something that holds appeal to them. So I do something that I like, and I also do something that I am able to do. Those are two critical things for my motivation to actually emerge. Okay? Now, another thing that comes into play here is, now that we know this, now that we know what gets employees going, or how could we kind of take more or derive more motivation out of them, what could managers do to make sure that this motivation is coming out of them? Okay? So, what managers could do is they could work on that E to P expectancy, right? So they want to raise employees' feelings that they are able to perform, right? Any thoughts on how I might be able to do that as a manager? If I want my employees to feel that they are able to perform, if I want them to feel that they are, if I want to boost their self-efficacy, right? I want them to feel that they are able to do something on the job. What are some things that we could do as managers to boost that expectancy? I want to make my employees feel that they are able to perform at a high level. I want them to feel that they have all the tools available to them, right? What are some things that I could do? You're someone new on the job, you're not sure if you're able to perform or not. As your manager, what could I do? No.
Provide all the resources necessary.
Okay, and those resources could be things like?
Could be anything like you can.
Someone else could be back if you want. Feedback. Feedback could be one. I would say especially in the early stages, perhaps, right? Like you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. Okay, perhaps.
Yeah, just acknowledge their efforts and like thank them.
Okay, other things though. Think more kind of practical terms. Things you do like on your first 3 months in the job. Training, right? Basic thing, right? One-on-one time with people who have been there before you, right? So they could teach you the ropes of how to do things. Training programs, right? All sorts of drills that you may need. All sorts of knowledge, in-class training, on-the-job training, right? Any other things kind of come to mind? Okay. So some things that we see is kind of, you know, to your point surrounding feedback, yeah, we offer that coaching, right? We say you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, this is how you could improve this. These are the best practices for, you know, generating high levels of sales, right? Hiring and training good staff to start with, making sure you lay out the expectations for the job quite clearly, okay? Now, another thing that we also want to focus on, or we want to make sure that managers are doing, is how do they make sure that employees feel that their performance is not going to go unacknowledged. So how do we make them know for sure that their knowledge is going to be, their performance is going to be acknowledged and it's going to be rewarded? So what are some things that you do as a manager there?
Like, not necessarily gifts, but like incentives.
Okay, that's the outcome piece. Okay, but something related to it is you lay out the incentives. You clearly communicate what the incentives are, right? Because that's a more informed employee. When I'm more informed as an employee, I have better knowledge, okay, as to how I should be dealing with my performance and how I should be altering my levels. Okay, other things?
Like you could use like some employees as an example, like ones who've done well in the past.
Right? Role modeling, kind of to your point earlier, and that this is what it took for this person to achieve this level, right? It is doable. It is something that you could achieve, right? So it's that role modeling behavior, right? Some things that are more systematic. To start with, you want to make sure that your performance assessment mechanism is valid. You want to make sure that you're assessing them correctly and assessing them fairly. So you want to make sure the processes that are in place to assess performance are actually fair to them. You communicate how performance is assessed early on. Okay, so those are some things that help me understand or help me feel that my work will be acknowledged. My work will not go unnoticed in the workplace. Okay, my work is likely to generate positive outcomes. Essentially, is what we're saying. Okay, and then some things that you want to do, kind of in terms of outcomes. Okay, I would say the key component there is acknowledging that different people are motivated by different outcomes. Okay, so you might be more financially motivated, whereas another person is really motivated by praise and things that are more not as financial in nature, right? So you want to make sure you're balancing those. You want to make sure you're in tune with that and how people appreciate things differently. Okay, so I'd say that's a key thing when it comes to increasing the valence of outcomes. Okay. Now, another process theory of motivation is goal setting theory. And goal setting theory, as the name suggests, again, what we're saying here is that when human beings set goals for themselves, those are likely to extract motivation or effort out of human beings, right? What? Out of human beings. Not in a bad way, not out of like deplete, no, like it generates more effort from employees, right? When they set goals for themselves, that directs their focus and their effort on something, right? So when people tell you kind of like, if you have a lot of things on your to-do list, the best thing to start with is to write them all down. Because the feeling you get, the gratification that you get from scratching something off your to-do list is amazing, right? That's intrinsic motivation. So that's how this works, right? Essentially, we're asking you to set a goal for yourself, right? My goal is to actually check this item off my to-do list, okay? And that's what gets motivation going. That's what gets more effort out of me as a person. Okay? Now, there are some caveats. Not every goal is going to be motivational, or not every goal is going to be as motivational as the other. There are some key criteria that goals have to meet for them to be considered motivation. The goal has to be specific and challenging, right? So it's not enough to say, oh, I want to do well in school. I want to get 5 A+ this semester, right? It's specific. It's something that is challenging. It gets you working towards something. You're not going to take it for granted. Okay? If it's something that is dull, if it's something that you know you could achieve, like if it's something like, my goal is to sit in class this semester. Like, come on. Actually, though, that seems to be quite a bit of a goal based on today's attendance rate. Thanks, guys. So that's what we mean. A goal has to be specific and challenging. Okay? Another thing is that you have to see some level of commitment, right, to it from the whole organization, right? So I'm a doctor, I want to save lives in this hospital. But if every other doctor in this hospital doesn't really care at all about patients, that's going to kind of affect you. You're going to feel like, what's the point, right? Why is it that I do what I do? Because nobody else cares in this hospital. So you have to see that commitment from others as well. Okay? And lastly, another key component is receiving feedback on those goals that you set. Okay? So if your manager set a goal for you to achieve, if time goes by and your manager never follows up with you on how you're doing and achieving that goal, what's going to register in your mind implicitly is, well, whether I do the work or not, nobody really cares in this organization. So that's why feedback is quite important, and it's pivotal to making sure that goals are truly motivating. Okay? Some more things about goals. You may have heard of the term SMART goals or smarter goals, right? So a goal has to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable. It has to be relevant, and it has to be within a certain time frame, right? The more you extend the time frame, the greater the likelihood that you're just going to slack and never accomplish it. Okay? And then, like, smarter is more of a newer iteration, I feel. Exciting, I would say it's more like challenging. It's not really exciting. I don't know why the book calls it exciting. It's more challenging. It has to be a challenging goal. And then we see that feedback component in the review. In terms of feedback, the feedback itself, feedback from managers, again, has to be specific, right? So we always advocate the use of metrics, right? Root your feedback in numbers, perhaps. Show a scale that you're rating your employees against. Give them something to work with. Give them metrics to work with, okay? I would say another key thing that we see and is the attention or is the focal point of a lot of HR work on performance assessment is the frequency in which you receive feedback, right? So for the longest time, and what's still actually prevalent in organizations, is the annual performance review, right? Thoughts on the annual performance review? Yay, nay? Are we up for it? Do we think there are flaws to it? Okay. So that's bad to start with, is if your employer is never even giving you one, right? Okay. Thoughts on the annual aspect. So if I am sitting down with my employees once a year and talking about their performance over the past year.
Well, you might only remember the most recent ones, performance in the year.
Absolutely, right? So we have that recency effect, right? That was on your exam, recency effect, right? You're biased. You only might rate your employees on the most recent months, but forget everything they've done over the past year, right? Other thoughts on why annual performance reviews might be bad? No? Did I hear voices? No? Okay. So it delays kind of, or it kind of jeopardizes being able to remedy mistakes, right? So if I am doing something wrong as an accountant, I'm doing some sort of process on the job wrong at the start of the year, and I'm only reliant on annual performance reviews to be able to address my shortcomings, I am botching accounting for 12 months, and then I get told that I've been botching it for 12 months, right? That's bad for me and bad for the organization, okay? So you want to make sure that your feedback is consistent and